Now, it's been a couple of days since I've been using the Blackmagic Pyxis 6K. I've been testing it out in some weird environments and also some controlled ones as well. Now, this video was going to be the 5 reasons why you might not want to buy the Blackmagic 6K. I know, catchy title. But not only was that going to be a little bit hyperbolic but also outright wrong, I wanted to make a video setting expectations before you click purchase on this camera. Today's video I'm going to talk about a couple of points you need to know before you pick up the Blackmagic 6K. And there might be an argument of why another camera might be made more for you depending what your needs are, but here's some things you need to be aware of. We'll get there. First things first, if you are looking for a camera to have a drastically different image quality than the full-frame 6K camera that came out last year, well, you're not looking at the right camera. Now, Blackmagic did tell us out the gate, the Pyxis 6K isn't going to have a drastic image quality difference from the full-frame cinema camera 6K that came out last year. Now, they have said they've made a couple of tweaks in terms of the image processing. However, if you used one as an A camera and one as a B camera, I would say most people wouldn't be able to distinguish between the two. Now, both are going to have great image quality in terms of their B-RAW. To be honest, in testing and actually owning both of these cameras, they're very much going to look the same. In fact, just before getting my Pyxis in, I actually did use a cinema camera 6K on a spec commercial that I had coming out at the end of the month, paired up with the Canon C80, which is an anecdote to say that both image qualities are really good, and I don't think you're going to see a gigantic difference between the two. The reason why the Pyxis exists is kind of the same reason as the FX6 and the FX3. Basically, they've taken the same technology they had from one sensor and moved it over to a new body for a different type of creator. Albeit there is no ND filters in there, which should be a point as well, but given at this price point, it wouldn't have been an expectation that I would have had. The second bit about managing expectations before buying the Pyxis is that this camera does not have autofocus. I'm going to say that again just in case we're confused. This camera does not have autofocus. It actually technically does have autofocus. Now, you do have an option of using single-shot autofocus while using L-mount native lenses on the Pyxis 6K, albeit nobody uses single-shot autofocus for video. So technically it is there, but in terms of usable autofocus for video, it doesn't have it. The Pyxis 6K and other Blackmagic cameras are generally meant to be used in more of a traditional sense, and oftentimes it's going to have someone pulling focus for you. You might be using cinema lenses. You could obviously use photo lenses as well, but where I think of where the segmentation of where the Pyxis actually lives is more of those traditional workflows where autofocus isn't necessarily at the top of the priorities list. If you're somebody that needs that run and gun autofocus, you might be looking at a different camera, maybe a Lumix S5 II or a Sony FX3, but if you're expecting that from a Blackmagic Pyxis 6K, you either have to get a DJI LiDAR focus, have a really good first AC, or pick another camera. I don't know what to tell you. Number 3, and I don't know if you guys know this, but this is more of a box style camera, and box cameras are meant to be rigged. Also, what's really common amongst box cameras is they do all have these monitors to them, except you're not supposed to use these monitors for regular camera operation. These are more to navigate some of your menu settings, but it is kind of an added bonus that you can see the image on this guy as well. Now, I've used and tested a variety of different cameras, mostly in the box form factors for a variety of different reasons, and the commonality between all of them is that usually you rig up these cameras with different accessories. Typically, you're going to have cages on them, and top handles, and monitor mounts, and microphone mounts, and everything of the like, and one thing that I think was a big point of contention for people on the Pyxis was the monitor on the side. Albeit, a camera that's meant to be rigged just like other box cameras are probably going to be rigged. In fact, Blackmagic went even a step further and made a monitor that's like 1/10 the price of the red monitor, and that gives you the option to not only free up an SDI port, but also you can just connect it by USB-C and you can still see your image and still have some of those controls on it as well. The Pyxis is meant to be rigged up just like other cinema cameras. The side screen is meant to give you access to the best menu, personally in my opinion, out of cameras that are out there, and it is kind of an added bonus that you can access things like false color, your focus peaking, and also see your image as well if you're on sticks and you're on the left side of the camera. However, that's not its main function. It's not meant to be your main monitor. Unless you're Mike Tobin and you burnt out an SDI port, in that case, well, you might have to use it whether or not you like it. Speaking of SDI and SDI Protocol, know your SDI protocol. Now, you are only going to get one SDI port on this Pyxis, which means you only have one Super Mario life until it's game over, and you're going to have to put a lot more than a quarter in the machine in order to get another one. Now, running it back to that monitor that's going to come out with the Pyxis, it's more than affordable to use that USB-C port and free up your SDI monitor, but using SDI protocol isn't necessarily exclusive to using monitors only. You might have to use wireless transmission or other things that you need that SDI port for, and essentially what you want to do is you just want to make sure that you don't turn off whatever device you're connected to while that cord is still plugged in. The weird thing about 12G SDI is it isn't grounded, which means that you can short it pretty easily other than using something like an HDMI cord. Now, it does take you an extra second in order to do that, but bringing it back to the use case of this in more traditional workflows, you're gonna have a second or two to make sure that you do your SDI protocol properly. This is going to be new for a lot of people. Because of the price of the Pyxis, it's a little bit cheaper, which means a lot more people are going to have it versus a red camera. You could burn out an SDI port on a red camera, you could burn it out on your FX6. You could also burn it out on a Venice, but they have like 9 SDI ports on them. I actually don't remember how many, but there's a lot. You're going to need to be a little bit safer with operating the camera in terms of that port. You only get one, but it's actually pretty easy to understand the protocol, and once you have that down and something that you should know, well, you don't have to worry about using that side monitor like we talked about earlier. Now, number 5, and this is going to be the biggest one about the Blackmagic Pyxis, is you don't want to try to fit an FX3 size hole with a Pyxis size peg. Hear me out for a second. Now, having a slightly earlier access to this camera than other people, a lot of questions that had come about this camera were in comparison to buying something like an FX3 or an FX6. I know that these guys are slightly in similar ballparks in terms of its functionality, its use, and in some cases even the price point. However, just because they are close together to each other doesn't necessarily mean that they are the same tool meant to actually compete with each other. The Sony FX3, for example, is a smaller, more compact camera that uses autofocusing lenses. It does have the ability to use XLR with that top handle, where the Pyxis has to use mini XLR to XLR cables. The form factor is going to be a lot different, and as well as there's internal RAW on the Pyxis. The two functions and the two reasons for these cameras are entirely different. So much so that I still have my Sony FX3 that I still keep because this doesn't take place of the Pyxis camera. The Pyxis is going to be used for more traditional workflows. If you're shooting documentary or commercial or even a short film or a feature, the Pyxis is made for more of those workflows where you are going to be working with crew and you're actually going to slow down and take your time with each individual shot. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Sony FX3 can't do that, but this is more made with more run and gun shooting in mind. It's a lot easier to set up. You're still going to get great image quality even if you're not getting 6K open gate B-RAW and all the anamorphic stuff. You are still going to get a very, very solid, a very good image out of this camera. But at the same time, the form factor for this camera is that it's meant to be put in more spaces that you wouldn't necessarily put your big camera in. Basically, what I'm trying to say is there's going to be different tools for different jobs, and with so many cameras that are out, even when they're at the same price point, you don't want to try to fix one with the other just because you might have consumed a bunch of videos people telling you that the Pyxis is a great camera, which it's still a great camera. Now, this video might end up being something like don't believe the hype of the Pyxis 6K, which actually is true, but at the same time has a little bit of nuance. I don't think that people should just blindly believe the hype of a camera video. There's going to be a lot of content. It's going to be a little bit more persuasive in order for you to make a purchase. But one thing that I want you to understand is there isn't a creator on this platform that wants you to make a blind decision that's going to be a detriment to you and your finances. Mostly because you could just return the camera, then there's kind of a zero sum anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. One thing that I could recommend when consuming this type of content, because I'm probably not going to stop making videos with this camera because I like it quite a bit, is to have a criteria about what you want for your camera. And if what I'm talking about or what other people are talking about on this camera don't fit those needs, don't buy it, please. Like, with all due respect and all candid and care, don't consume this camera. Don't buy it. Don't press that button on B&H or whatever you use just because you've consumed content. Use your list of your own criteria as your North Star, as no other form of media marketing, whatever the case might be, should be able to sway that decision for you. If I tell you this camera doesn't have autofocus 16 times and you need autofocus, just because you've consumed 27 videos about the Pyxis, please don't get this camera if you need autofocus. I'm going to say this on behalf of a lot of creators because there is a lot of chatter around some of these releases and the marketing of stuff. Marketing should only work if you actually have an inherent need for that thing. Similarly speaking, when I see a commercial about cigarettes, I'm not going to consume cigarettes because I don't have any interest in doing it. If you do have criteria in terms of what you want from your camera, everything that releases out should just be kind of anecdotal, fun, entertainment stuff for other things that are going to be available, but ultimately your needs are your needs, and most creators actually don't know you on the other side of the screen, so we're all just trying our best here. I'd also venture to say I don't think a lot of brands want you making a blind detrimental decision either, or they wouldn't be carting this camera around all over every single expo between April and October, even though that was way too long of a wait for a camera in general. Essentially what I want to do is essentially what I want to say is don't necessarily believe the hype of the Blackmagic Pyxis. Albeit it has a lot of features that are very good, which are going to be highlighted, but ultimately there are things that are going to be glaringly obvious that might not be for you, and just because you've consumed a ton of content, please, for the love of God, I'm going to say this for the last time, don't buy this camera if it doesn't fit your needs. Don't buy any camera if it doesn't fit your needs. That being said, this is a video where I wanted to set some expectations up for the Blackmagic Pyxis and why some of the hype is readily justified. It is an amazing camera for a lot of different reasons. However, if it doesn't fit your needs, maybe you don't necessarily need to get it. That being said, I should probably talk more about the image quality. I actually put a bunch of stuff that I got captured over the weekend, but I'm going to get more into the nitty gritty. And YouTube also thinks you should probably watch that video over there. Okay, peace.